The main character was a famous YouTuber who read books to her viewers, but one day her life changed when she fell asleep during her broadcast. She always prepared thoroughly for her broadcasts, setting up her equipment, getting herself ready, and choosing the right dress. She was always very happy with herself, but she had to remember that when she was a teenager, she lost her parents and had to live with relatives. Then she had to combine her studies and work, but there were days when she was very tired. But at the same time, she liked everything. She really enjoyed reading books to her audience, and the cosplay she came up with was taken from the cover of her favorite book. The girl even decided that in honor of the official collaboration on that broadcast, she was ready to read all the chapters up to the 15th. As soon as she started reading, she didn't really understand who the main character of the novel was, what he was thinking, and what he was doing. This was the fifth emperor of the Marcel Empire, Karl Frederick, who had a wife named Luna, but he had a secret that he kept even from her. As she read on, the girl realized that the emperor suffered from insomnia and that neither medicine nor magic could help him. Soon she realized that the emperor was willing to just lie in someone's arms until he fell asleep. A little later, the girl began to realize that she was very sleepy and tried with all her might to fight it, but to no avail. At that moment, it seemed to her that she couldn't go on like this, because all her viewers understood that something was wrong. So she stopped broadcasting. When she opened her eyes, she realized that it was probably her own voice that had lulled her to sleep, but she didn't know where she was. As soon as she looked around, she realized that she was in the emperor's mansion, where it was forbidden to shout or argue. Both guards tried to hold her, but the girl wanted to break free with all her might, but nothing worked. Turning her head, she saw another girl who was just as frightened and did not understand what was happening. It was all very strange because just a few minutes ago she was broadcasting, and now she was in an unknown place. The maid ordered one girl to raise her face and tried to explain that it was their first night, and therefore they had to follow certain rules. The woman emphasized that without the emperor's permission, they were not allowed to make any sounds or even move, and they had to obey all of His Majesty's orders. As soon as she heard all this, she simply could not believe that this was happening to her. Right in front of the emperor's door, the woman said that they could pull a rope and someone would come, but only if His Majesty's actions seemed very strange. When the door opened, the guards immediately forced the girls to their knees and presented them to the emperor. At first, they started screaming a little. One even tried to close her eyes, but when she opened them, she was simply shocked by what she saw. Standing before her was Karl, the tyrant from the novel, whom everyone considered a complete scoundrel and despot. Then she decided that her end had come. But despite his terrible character and no matter how bad he was, his appearance was simply stunning. Such beauty could not even be captured on canvas. Now she understood that this was not a dream, and that she had really found herself in another world with the emperor, who enjoyed the company of court ladies every night. When he looked at another girl, he realized that he did not need her. One would be enough. The girl immediately began to recall all the rules that the maid had emphasized, but she had no idea what to do next. He stood right in front of her and didn't like how she was behaving, because she was just crying and looking at the floor. The emperor took her by the hand and wanted to lift her up, emphasizing that everyone who wanted to live with him under the same roof in that mansion had to obey him. As soon as he raised his hand to hit her, another girl immediately stood up for her. His Majesty could not even imagine that some girl was capable of such a thing. At first, he was very angry, but then he decided to stay alone with her and even began to smile. It seemed to him that he had never met anyone so crazy who could allow herself to tell the emperor what to do. The man looked intently into her eyes and did not yet understand what to do with her, but he saw that there was definitely no fear in her eyes. Then he threw her off his large, soft bed with all his might. Her hair flew in all directions, and her eyes simply closed on their own. He looked at her with a rather strange expression, but did nothing, yet she was sure that she had to run away and save her life. As soon as she turned around, an object fell out of her pocket, which the maid had put there for her just in case the situation got out of control. When she finally decided to use it, His Majesty decided that it was better not to resist and simply threw it aside. At that moment, she thought she was going to be killed, but first they would take away the most precious thing she had kept for 23 years. It was then that the girl decided to ask for forgiveness and promise that nothing like this would ever happen again. But surprisingly, he was calm and seemed to just want to touch her with his hand. She confessed that she considered herself worthless and that she did not deserve to spend the night with His Majesty. But then she suggested that he just listen to her voice. She felt as if she were in front of an audience and began to tell a story. As she spoke, her voice was so calm that it was impossible not to focus on it. As soon as she stopped and wanted to address him, the emperor insisted that she not stop and continue. Only a few minutes passed, and the man fell unconscious onto the girl. Then she realized that he had been suffering from insomnia, and now he had finally fallen asleep. His Majesty was actually very large and heavy, so much so that the girl found it difficult to breathe, but there was nothing she could do. Now that he was asleep, she could see him clearly. His hair was like gold, and his eyelashes were incredibly long and beautiful. For a moment, she even began to imagine that they could be a couple, but she quickly realized that it was all nonsense. It was once said that he could easily kill a court lady out of his own torment. She kept looking at him and thinking that she could escape while he was asleep, but she didn't know what to do with the girl lying next to her on the floor. By the time she made up her mind to do something, His Majesty returned, settled down more comfortably, and continued to sleep soundly. Throughout his sleep, he held her tightly and begged her not to leave him. Then she noticed that he was indeed a very handsome and attractive man. In fact, she was also very tired. Her strength was beginning to leave her, and her eyes were slowly closing. It seemed to her that if she fell asleep, she would wake up in her own room. Marquis Raz knew very well that the emperor had an unusual symptom. When it started, he became very cruel. Therefore, all the ladies who came to His Majesty at night suffered greatly and suffered terrible injuries, but the emperor himself was unaware of his illness. It seemed to him that nothing terrible had happened that night, because everything was quiet and peaceful around him. And when he entered His Majesty's chambers, he saw young people sleeping soundly in each other's arms. He was simply stunned and began to shout, "Surely this couldn't be happening." As soon as the emperor woke up, he immediately pushed her out of bed. But for her, it was a very strange situation, because in the evening, he had behaved differently towards her. She couldn't even believe that she had spent the whole night next to the emperor and they had just slept quietly. Raz immediately offered to take the girls away, because His Majesty had to get himself ready and attend to his important affairs. The man invited them to his room and wanted to clarify the situation. He thought that everything had gone smoothly that night, but he could not have imagined such an ending. Then suddenly, his hand reached out to the girl and he wanted to heal the wound on her cheek. He was a true magician. Raz emphasized that the emperor could not be shown any injuries if they were present, which is why he gave the girls his artifact. It was the red stone. Then the blonde decided to thank her friend for not being afraid and standing up for her in front of the emperor. As soon as they both heard that the emperor had simply fallen down all night, their eyes grew several times larger in surprise. When His Majesty was left alone, he was stunned by his condition. It seemed to him that his memory problems had started again. He also decided that very strange things had been happening to him lately. He was quite alert, but he couldn't remember what had happened to him. The emperor decided that it was all due to insomnia, but when he remembered the woman with whom he had spent the night, he immediately realized that his headache had disappeared. He simply could not believe that he felt so good and free that he could not believe it. 3 years had passed since he had taken the throne, and it was then that he began to suffer from insomnia. Previously, he could only sleep 2 hours a week, but even after a short sleep, he felt very tired, and now he could even smile. Now he understood that it was possible to enjoy a beautiful morning. When he went to the window to look at his possessions, he immediately realized that the entire empire was already aware that His Majesty had finally rested. But he was still troubled by the feeling of what had happened that night, and whether it could have happened just because he had held that strange girl tightly in his arms. Neither doctors nor magicians could cure his insomnia, but now it turned out that just one night with a stranger was the solution to a 3-year problem. The emperor was able to sleep for the first time in 3 years, but he didn't know what to do next if the girl had really helped him with his problem. Raz immediately decided to visit the emperor to resolve some issues and discuss his night. He understood that His Majesty had heard what was going on behind the door, but didn't want to let him in. Then Raz began to speak too loudly and insist that the door be opened. Soon the door opened and the emperor himself appeared before him. looking quite well and with a fresh expression on his face. The magician was convinced that the emperor should marry the girl who had helped him that night and make her empress. The man did not want to hear anything of the sort and was determined to have her thrown out of the estate immediately. The emperor was prepared for the fact that this stranger could cause him a lot of trouble, so he did not want to see her again. The magician was convinced that this was a very radical approach and that it was definitely not the right thing to do. He listened to his assistant magician for a long time and at the end of the conversation decided to have him bring the girl back to His Majesty's bedroom. Meanwhile, the girl sat at the table and tried to remember everything that had happened to her and write it down on paper. This man's name was Gorgo Raz, who was the best magician in the entire empire and was also considered the protector of the emperor himself. It seemed to her that in order to survive, she needed to write down what she knew and what she would have to learn. While she was in the room of her new acquaintance, Sophia, she decided that she could learn a little more about her. There was a large portrait of a woman hanging on the wall in the room, and she decided that it was Sophia's mother. Then she decided to read the letter that was next to her and realized that Sophia was the girl who was awaiting a cruel death at the hands of the tyrannical emperor. The main character's sister, who was believed to be missing, had not actually disappeared. Sophia's father, Robert, sacrificed his daughter to the tyrant himself and pushed her to her certain death. Then she decided to gather her thoughts and think everything through, because she was definitely not ready to die just like that. She decided that she had to remember the entire plot of the novel she had already read. When the boy turned 8, his mother died of some disease. And when he came of age, his father, the previous emperor, died of some unknown disease as well. The girl immediately remembered that all of Karl's relatives had died and he was left alone. Then he took the throne and became a tyrant. It seemed to her that there was very little time and that she had to do everything she could to escape from that place. But the door to their room opened and guards burst in, who were supposed to quickly take the girl to the emperor's bedroom. She simply couldn't believe it, but she understood that they had come for her. She had to obey because there was no other way out. Soon she found herself before His Majesty, but she didn't like the harsh treatment she received, that no one gave her any chance. When she looked at him, she realized that he was incredibly handsome, but at the same time, the whole situation began to scare her very much. He began to ask questions that he wanted answers to, and then ordered her to try to put him to sleep again. It seemed to her that this was not happening to her, because she had not expected that His Majesty would want to listen to her again and fall asleep to her voice. But he immediately warned her that if she failed, she would definitely lose her head. He couldn't wait for her to start working on him, but the girl just sat there and looked at his beautiful body. Tired of waiting, he grabbed the poor girl, threw her on the bed, and wanted her to carry out the emperor's order. She understood that if it weren't for his terrible character, he could have been her type. But at that moment, she caught herself thinking that she was definitely not thinking what she should be thinking. After gathering her thoughts, Sophia promised that she would put him to sleep and not waste time on empty talk. Then she emphasized that he needed to lie down next to her and just listen carefully to everything she was going to say. Sophia decided to start with the fairy tale about the Snow Queen. Her voice was so gentle and mesmerizing that it was only a few minutes before he was asleep. When she moved a little closer to him, she realized that His Majesty had fallen asleep, but she continued to tell the story quietly. At that moment, he reminded her of a child, and she thought that perhaps he wasn't really the tyrant that everyone thought he was. The girl caught herself thinking that she really liked this man, but at that moment she had to think about how to get out, not about her feelings. In her opinion, it wasn't very high up, but the entire estate was certainly full of guards and knights, so she had to postpone her escape a little. As soon as the girl entered the room, she immediately noticed that there were quite a few strangers she didn't know very well. When she saw the man, she immediately decided to ask him what he was doing in this house. After he started talking to the girl normally, he immediately apologized because he was convinced that she might be very scared. After their conversation, he decided to calmly escort the girl so that she would not worry that someone might threaten her. When the beauty spoke with Robin, she immediately emphasized that she knew quite a few stories that some people simply kept quiet about. The lady was actually surprised when she first saw the woman, because no one in the palace had expected such an unexpected moment. After that, she decided to discuss a topic that no one liked to discuss in this place, because the topic of the emperor was off limits to everyone. Hearing these words, the girls began to feel very uncomfortable because they understood that this had a bad influence on everyone, and none of them were ready to talk about it. But the girl, in turn, with a big smile, told the story that everyone had known for a long time and enjoyed cookies at the same time. Meanwhile, as soon as the emperor returned to his normal state, he realized that this time his head did not hurt as it had before. When the man saw himself from the side, he realized that he was very poorly dressed, so he decided to quickly fix everything. Eventually, his condition normalized, and the man began to feel well, so he wanted to see who was around him. But he had not gone far when a man approached him and asked if he could spare a few minutes. Realizing who was standing in front of him, the young man was a little speechless and did not even know what to say to the man, but then decided to talk to him calmly. But the manager immediately noticed that he was fine because he had slept well a couple of hours ago and was in a good mood. As soon as his interlocutor started talking about girls, the man immediately closed his eyes and did not want to answer. The girl, in turn, could not understand where she was because every time she approached the window, she saw something new. After a while, a lady approached her and asked if the beauty was feeling well at that moment. The lady was surprised to see such a person, but the girl continued to smile confidently and talk about herself. As soon as they touched on the subject of the emperor, the girl's expression quickly changed and she didn't even know what she wanted to say to her companion. At the end of the conversation, the girl asked the beauty not to listen to other people's advice, which at times was very harmful to her. Meanwhile, a man came up to her and suggested that they go to another room to talk about everything in peace. First, the girl decided to ask why a person she didn't know very well had invited her to drink tea in such an atmosphere. The man had no intention of lying, so he decided to calmly tell her his story, which was very important to him. The girl was surprised to hear this, but decided to listen calmly, because in the past there could have been some interesting offers from the man. He offered the beauty a fairly good reward for one difficult task, namely, she had to help the emperor fall asleep. Hearing this with her own ears, she realized that it would actually be very difficult to endure mentally, because the leader was an interesting person. Then he began to emphasize that the task had to be completed anyway because it was very important to the emperor. He was convinced that the girl had a unique ability that could greatly help her in such situations, so he was counting on her support. The beauty, in turn, was simply shocked to hear this from the man, but she understood that she actually had a good ability that could help her. But as soon as she heard how much they were paying for such work, she immediately realized that she would most likely do it because the money was too much. Then the woman asked again what exactly she had to do because she might not have fully understood her duties. The man began to explain that everything was not as the girl had thought, because he was suffering from a serious illness that was affecting him badly. Realizing that she was the only person in the entire empire who could put her husband to sleep peacefully, the heroine was stunned but decided not to say anything. She began to emphasize that she couldn't actually use her unique power every day, so she understood that she didn't need to be persuaded to do it every day. Then he banged his arsenal with all his might and emphasized that it was actually an order from the emperor himself and that the girl couldn't refuse. Despite his loud words, she began to emphasize that she did not want to do it, even though it was the emperor's order. The man emphasized that he would pretend he had not heard her words, so he would be waiting for her at work the next day. Meanwhile, the beauty decided to think it all over carefully because she realized that she did not really like this job. A moment later, she was overcome with a desire to just eat quietly because she wanted to rest from all these events, but her colleague was not so happy. Later, she noticed that the girls she always talked to started making fun of her, and she didn't like it. She decided that she wouldn't put up with such terrible treatment, so she asked them to say what they thought to her face. One of the women insisted that no one take the girl seriously because she thought the beauty was a little out of her mind. Only then did she realize what bad people she had always been around, so she decided to simply stand her ground no matter what. A second later, the girl began to notice that her main rival was slowly approaching her, which made the heroine a little wary. As soon as one of the women came closer to her, the beauty emphasized that they completely lacked any normal manner of communication. A second later, one of them asked the girl to bend over, and then her rival emphasized that she would soon be a real empress. Meanwhile, the man decided to go to his emperor and tell him everything that had happened in his empire. The worker first emphasized that now was not the time to just sit on the bed and do nothing. Then the man said that strange rumors about Sophia had begun to spread throughout the house. Later, the young man decided to embellish the whole story so that the emperor would truly understand the problems in his kingdom. He also mentioned the girl's surname, and as it turned out, the man had heard it before, so he understood that this really needed to be sorted out. He was fully aware that he could not do anything about the empress or his maid, so he understood that he needed to explain everything clearly. After a while, the girl was asked if she was sure she didn't want to go out for lunch, as it was quite important to them. But the beauty decided that she wanted to leave as soon as possible, so she said goodbye to her friend and moved on. After that, the girl realized that they would definitely want to kill her after such an act, so she had to run away quickly so that no one would catch her. A second later, 2 workers came up to her and insisted that she go with them to the emperor. The young man, in turn, continued to do his daily work, because every day there were more and more documents. As soon as she was near him, the emperor immediately began to explain the entire situation in his empire. Hearing these words, she began to think that he was actually a madman who did not understand what he was saying. After a while, he emphasized that the girl should behave normally and control herself, because he did not want her to feel so confident. He was also convinced that he had simply allowed the girl to stay with him because she helped him get a good night's sleep. At times, he didn't like that the woman often made up completely different and incomprehensible things that everyone then talked about. After that, the beauty simply stopped talking and realized that she didn't actually play an important role here, as she had thought at first. Paying attention to the man, she noticed how beautifully he changed his face when he spoke. After he started leaning closer to her, the girl just froze and couldn't say anything, and he realized that she wasn't afraid of him at all. Looking at each other, they understood that they had to behave politely, even though the man didn't really love the girl. In the end, she simply thanked the emperor for everything he had done for her, because she was still in good conditions despite everything. The girl was also convinced that she was not interested in the title of empress at all, and never really wanted to become one. After listening to all her words, the man knew for sure that if the girl did not perform her duties well, he would not just leave her. As soon as he told her everything he wanted to say, he immediately informed her that she could leave him in peace because he had nothing more to say to her. After talking to the girl in person, he realized that everything was very different from what he had heard from his workers. After some time, the man realized that he simply could not concentrate on one thing, so he racked his brains for quite a long time to find an answer. Realizing that his strength was leaving him again, he decided that he needed to convince the girl to help him again as soon as possible. He remembered the events when she had helped him fall asleep, and after that, he felt completely different. There were 2 thoughts in his head that constantly contradicted each other, so he couldn't understand what he needed to rely on more. What interested the man most was that the girl had actually changed a lot after she helped him fall asleep. The workers offered to walk the girl home, but she immediately refused because she knew the way very well. As soon as she noticed that everyone had left to eat, she was convinced that now was the perfect time to escape from this area. Suddenly, someone addressed her and she turned her head, but she knew that she did not want to abandon her plan. However, after a while, she realized that the workers had not left her and were still watching her closely. Fortunately, the girl finally saw a perfect moment that she had to take advantage of right away, because she might not have another chance like this in the future. She started running as fast as she could because she knew that the workers could start chasing her at any moment. They were surprised that Lady Sophia had started acting so strangely, but decided that they would catch up with her no matter what. As soon as the girl got closer to the window, she realized that the only way out was to jump out of it and run away from this place as fast as she could. The men, in turn, did not dare to do what the girl had done, and by then she was almost on the ground. Fortunately, the emperor quickly managed to catch up with the girl and catch her with his own hands, because she could have simply crashed. He did not understand why the girl behaved this way, but she was quite frightened and closed her eyes. Only then did he realize that this person was actually very gentle and sweet, so he decided that she needed to be protected. After a while, when the girl showed no signs of life, he began to touch her head, and only then did she begin to move. As soon as she opened her eyes, she immediately noticed the emperor standing and holding her in his arms, and then the girl felt that he was indeed a very strong man. But as soon as she realized what had happened, she immediately decided to get out of his arms because she began to feel uncomfortable. First of all, the man wanted to know why the girl had done such a thing, because she could have seriously harmed her health once and for all. Looking at this handsome man, she realized that appearance played an important role for her. At first, she decided to come closer and apologize for her bad behavior because she began to understand that she had acted foolishly. The young man, in turn, did not understand what had caused such a reaction, so he just stood there quietly, looking at the girl, and decided not to say anything. As soon as she expressed her opinion, she immediately decided to leave the area because she did not want to talk to anyone anymore. Then, the girl decided to simply bow to the man and thank him for his wonderful deed because he had truly saved her life. A second later, the young man realized that if the girl was really so grateful to him, she should do something in return for the emperor. The young man decided to quickly intervene in the conversation and emphasized that the emperor had done a very bad thing because he could have ruined his future. But in reality, the man was fully aware of what he was saying because from the very beginning, he had called people who could help him. The young man was sure that if he had not arrived in time, a very bad situation could have occurred. But the emperor denied all of this. The beautiful girl was shocked to hear this, but decided not to say anything more. The hero decided to talk to the girl himself and emphasized that if she fell out of the window even once, she would simply say goodbye to her life once and for all. Then he wanted to find out why the girl had done such a thing because it could end very badly in the future. The emperor decided to leave the area, so he emphasized to the girl one last time that if he ever needed her, he would do everything to ensure that she lived. She was surprised to hear such words, but she understood that she actually had some support from the authorities, which played an important role for her. After this conversation, the man decided to personally approach the girl and ask if she was feeling okay, but it turned out that everything was fine. At that moment, the beauty decided to step away from the man and think about the situation that had just happened in her life. That day, she kept asking herself why the emperor had saved her life, but she never came up with an answer. After this situation, the girl realized that the emperor had increased her security, and now 2 men were constantly watching her. As soon as she tried to open the window to get some fresh air, they immediately closed it, because they understood that no one wanted to take any risks. With each passing day, it became more difficult for her to escape from such a house, because the guards were always watching her, even when she was asleep. Eventually, she began to dislike this very much, so she decided to meet with her friend who was about to arrive. Meanwhile, the emperor was also thinking about all these events and wanted to understand why the girl simply wanted to commit suicide. After analyzing everything, he also did not come to a final conclusion, but he understood that there was some really important reason that could play a serious role. As soon as the girl saw the man again with her own eyes, she wanted to ask him if she could meet with the emperor today. When she heard the negative answer, she began to beg the man to help her, and only then did he agree. As soon as the beauty saw the emperor with her own eyes, she immediately took something out of her pocket and said that it was her debt. The emperor was truly shocked to see this and had no idea what it was, so he decided to ask the girl himself. As it turned out, before she started working for him, the girl wanted to have a personal contract that could somehow help her legally. At first, the man wanted to know why the beauty had so unexpectedly decided to take such a step, since she had never thought about it before. She had no intention of lying to her interlocutor, so she emphasized that this was the only way she could concentrate on one thing. After analyzing what the girl had written, he wanted to know if she really had enough money, because he had offered her much more from the very beginning. Then, lowering her head, the girl emphasized that she just wanted to make up for her mistake in doing such a rash thing. Observing the whole situation, the man realized that the girl had really learned something from it. As it turned out, the beauty had another reason. She wanted to work for the best emperor she had ever known in her life. He was stunned to hear such words, but at first decided not to trust them because he did not know how the girl would behave in the future. Nevertheless, the man decided to rely on the facts written in the letter, so he was convinced that the girl was telling him the truth. After that, she decided to ask once again if the man understood that she was no longer pursuing any ulterior motives. When they had discussed everything clearly, the man asked the girl to sign the letter as it was quite important before drawing up any documents. At times, He realized that he had to agree to all the conditions that the girl wanted, because his future life depended on it. Sometimes she was very upset, but then the man emphasized that he would also sign now and their documents would be completely ready. Meanwhile, another character began to feel guilty towards Sophia, because now she had to work for the emperor for quite a long time. Unable to hold back her tears, she began to cry very hard and was convinced that she was the one who had done such a bad thing to the girl. As soon as she entered her husband's room, she immediately bowed to him and asked how he was feeling today. The beauty did not want to waste her precious time, so she decided to get straight down to business and asked if her husband was completely ready. After he heard a lot of stupid questions directed at him, he immediately told the girl never to ask him such things again. But she was convinced that these were perfectly reasonable questions, because she was gathering information to cure her husband once and for all. He was surprised to hear this, but he understood that she was right in this situation, so he decided to just agree with her. The girl began to emphasize that she would behave very well, but she also knew that this did not change the fact that the man was her patient. She was convinced that if the patient did not simply listen to her, there could be no normal treatment, as this would have a negative effect. Hearing these words, the man began to smile broadly, as he was convinced that the girl had simply lost her fear. As soon as she began to dislike the situation, the girl immediately emphasized that she had a contract, so they could end it all at any moment. After that, the man began to behave differently because he understood that he was not in a position to express his views, and then the girl decided to continue. When the beauty noticed that the man was not listening to her at times, she asked him if he was interested in being with her. He did not like this question very much because he usually took the initiative, but now he was not in a position to do so. When she turned her head away, she noticed that the man seemed to have fallen asleep, and she liked it very much. Now she was 100% convinced that her tactic of putting the emperor to sleep was working perfectly, and she couldn't help but be pleased. But the beauty understood that she still had to be very vigilant because the emperor always seemed so sweet, although sometimes he was not. As soon as the man unfolded his card, he noticed that in fact there had been no change, and this news disappointed him greatly. He was also very concerned that the girl had been very insecure at times, but now everything had changed, and she had become like a different person. The young man was convinced that this was all because he had successfully saved her life, and now she felt differently towards him. After a while, a worker came and said that the lady had forgotten her personal belongings, so he wanted to give them to her husband. As soon as the emperor opened his eyes, he noticed that this time his bed seemed much larger, and he finally regained his strength. The emperor realized that these memories had only come back to him today, because he had never had them before. But before he had time to think about it, the worker came in, and the last thing he saw was his girlfriend flying toward him. The girl decided to ask how the young man had regained his strength during the last night, because she knew that he had been sleeping soundly. At that time, he could not understand how all this had happened in his life, but he was really very grateful to the heroine. When they started talking about the girl's abilities, the man wanted to know why she had come to his room, since she could have done all this from a distance. The lady, in turn, decided to deny it all, but the man stood his ground and was convinced that he was right. Looking at him, she realized that he was actually changing the subject very abruptly, and she didn't like it. But when the emperor's anger began to overflow, he simply asked the girl to do her job and leave him alone. She understood very well that if she stayed close to Sophia, she would put her in danger, and then she would be no different from the other girls. The girls around her constantly discussed how the girl had been able to seduce their emperor with her body, and that was why she behaved so confidently. Sophia's friend was very indignant and was sure that no one had seduced His Majesty, and certainly had not tried to take the Empress's place. But still, some of them were convinced that Sophia, coming from a simple family, had neither status nor position, and therefore tried to use all kinds of cunning methods on the emperor. Suddenly, Sophia appeared and pulled En to their room to calm her down a little. En tried to apologize for avoiding Sophia lately, and said she wanted to leave the estate no matter what it took. She had decided that she needed to behave very quietly, but now that everything had changed, she was not prepared to put up with such treatment. Sophia considered her a good person and didn't want En to feel guilty about anything. But in reality, it was unclear whether they would ever be able to leave the estate. His Majesty was in his room, drinking wine and lost in thought. When Sophia entered, she couldn't believe that he had drunk the entire bottle of wine by himself, even though she had forbidden him to do so. She thought that if he drank that much, he would not only have trouble sleeping, but also suffer from a hangover, and then she would definitely not be able to help him. After a couple of minutes, she wanted him to go to bed so she could put him to sleep, but she also noticed that he had finished the wine that was left, not realizing how strong it was. Every time he went to bed, she began to tell him a fairy tale, and it only took him a few minutes to fall asleep. As soon as she saw that the emperor had fallen asleep, she realized that she was a little drunk from that glass of wine. When she tried to get out of bed, her head began to spin, and her legs could barely hold her up. The next day, she had incredible pain from the strong drink. The emperor drank such a drink even during dinner, and in the evening he drank 2 bottles. Suddenly, Roz appeared before her, ready to discuss some issues with her, but it all had to be done in private. The man gave her the pendant she had lost, which was the only thing she had received from her mother and could have lost forever. He was very interested in whether the girl missed her family, because after she came to the estate, she had no opportunity to see them. Everything seemed normal to her because she did not have a normal relationship with her father, and her mother had died a long time ago. But she was still pleased that Ross took care of her. She couldn't even imagine that he was so caring. Now, every morning when His Majesty had breakfast, everything went without wine, and this bothered him greatly. Last night, Sophia forbade the emperor to drink alcohol, and he remembered it well. She only allowed a little before bedtime. He felt that he had signed the agreement with her in vain, but when he remembered his insomnia, he immediately changed his mind. She understood very well that His Majesty drank a lot of wine and could easily become addicted to alcohol, but he was still holding on very well. But that evening, he couldn't fall asleep for a long time. His heart was beating fast in his chest, and it all seemed very strange. He even began to worry a little. When she picked up the cup, she realized that her husband had drunk a lot of strong black tea. Since wine was not allowed, the emperor had decided to replace it. Now it was clear that he couldn't sleep because of the caffeine in the black tea. Sophia decided not to leave him and stay with him for a while. He begged her not to leave him alone until he fell asleep. It seemed to her that when he smiled, he was a completely different person, who was definitely not like a tyrant. The next day, he was ready to talk to Sophia, who wanted to discuss something with him. She believed that the emperor should completely eliminate wine from his diet. Even 1 glass a day could be very harmful to him. This was really difficult for him, so he asked for at least 1 glass every 3 days. She couldn't refuse. The next day, she closed the curtains and turned off the lights. Although he didn't like the darkness, he still couldn't fall asleep until 3 hours later. Sophia was sure that it was getting harder and harder to put him to sleep every day. Watching him sleep, it seemed as if he was having a nightmare and might even bite his lip. It would be a shame if his beautiful face were covered in blood and wounds. Although the man was not a small child, Sophia decided to try one more method and began to sing a song like a little child. The emperor was actually having a terrible dream in which a little boy was being killed, and he was trying with all his might to save himself. Throughout the dream, he called for his mother, and tears began to roll down his cheeks. His parents had died when he was very young. When the man turned over, she saw a very strange mark on his back, but it was just a huge scar. Meanwhile, at the Blan estate, the Duke believed that the emperor was very interested in the girl who had disobeyed him because he had ordered her to behave very quietly. He understood that if rumors spread, it would reflect very badly on him. The man understood very well that everything would be very bad if everyone found out that he had sold his unmarried daughter to the emperor as a court lady. It was well known that if everything was left as it was, the girl could cause a lot of trouble. Therefore, he decided that he had to get rid of her before it was too late. Roz simply could not believe that a young lady could control the emperor's diet and even his sleep and awakening. As soon as he entered the emperor's bedroom, he reminded him that it was time to get ready for the meeting, which was already supposed to have started. His Majesty was completely composed, and even his assistant thought he had become very soft. All the girls in the mansion tried to discuss even the smallest details every time, but they understood very well that it was dangerous to talk about anything within the walls of the imperial mansion. Lady Eva was the youngest daughter of the Marquis of Tyrum. She was the first contender for the position of Empress and the favorite of the court ladies. But Eva was greatly inferior to some unknown aristocrat named Sophia, so it was no surprise that Eva was not in a good mood at the time. Eva believed that the drought would soon end and everything would return to normal. But until then, she had to be very careful. Everyone present was eagerly awaiting the emperor and believed that he would not attend the meeting this time either. And they were also convinced that he was preoccupied with his insomnia. Then one of them decided that if the emperor was not feeling well, they should do their work even better. Suddenly the door opened and the emperor appeared in all his glory. He looked very handsome and was in a surprisingly good mood. He was very surprised that everyone present was in a hurry and had even closed the door without waiting for him. It seemed that they wanted to discuss everything without him. He did not like it at all that the men did not even dare to stand up when he entered the hall. Then everyone around began to apologize to him. Sophia understood that in the novels she was reading, the harvest festival was a symbol of tragedy and revenge. In the first part, Carl left Luna on the night of the festival, and in the second part, she danced with another man and took revenge on Carl. Now in the novel, Sophia had become a court lady and had to choose jewelry for the holiday, but she was not doing it for herself. All the court ladies often carried out the emperor's orders, but during the holidays they also helped ladies from aristocratic families choose outfits and jewelry. The necklace they both chose was simply incredible, but the lady ordered Sophia to try it on. The woman thought that it suited the girl better, and since it was her first holiday, she wanted her to wear it. According to tradition, before the banquet began, the ladies and court ladies chose jewelry for each other. As soon as they both arrived at the ball, everyone around them simply couldn't take their eyes off them, and this was because the girl had a rather strange and special relationship with His Majesty. The woman was simply very surprised that the girl had worn the ruby necklace on that particular day. Sophia couldn't believe that the lady had reacted that way, because she had put it on herself and wanted her to wear it at the event. The woman emphasized that only members of the imperial family could wear such expensive ruby necklaces on such a harvest holiday. Soon, Eva joined them and also tried to make her own corrections. The women simply began to mock Sophia and pretend that it was all because the girl had only recently arrived at the estate, so she didn't know all the rules, and there was no need to be angry with her. Everyone around was trying to discuss His Majesty, and the fact that he was definitely interested in marrying this new court lady. The lady was sure that first you had to learn good manners, and only then could you count on the attention of the emperor himself. Sophia was simply stunned by what was happening around her. She was even ready to put everything in its place right then and there. Everyone thought that Sophia wanted to attract the emperor's attention and even tried to jump out of the window. Her patience ran out and she was now ready to show what she was capable of, but first she decided to take off the necklace she was wearing. But just then, the emperor approached her, took her by the hand, and wanted to walk away with her. No one even expected to see him there. He was so angry at what he had heard that he took a bottle of wine and poured it over the head of the woman who had said all those things. Then, in front of all the women, he emphasized that he simply hated them all, and that there was not a single one among them who could satisfy him. She could not believe that the emperor had told all the ladies that she was just a tool that was very necessary and useful to him. After that, he saw no reason to stay there and took Sophia with him. It seemed to him that all those ladies were still there, because he could smell their perfume. She immediately suggested that they sit down and rest for a while, but she understood that he really hated women, though she did not understand why. Then she suggested leaving, because she could see that the emperor was a little uncomfortable with her being there. But everything was completely different. He grabbed her hand again and didn't want her to leave him. It was the first time in a long time that he had been with a girl in that place. He used to come there just to be alone and not be disturbed by anyone. Suddenly, she interrupted him when she looked up and saw a meteor shower in the sky. It was very strange to see her behave like that. The girl explained that if you make a wish, it will definitely come true at some point, but this seemed very strange to him, as he had done this many times before, but nothing had ever come true. Then she decided to close her eyes and make only one wish, to leave that place as quickly as possible. He, in turn, quietly closed his eyes and asked that she never leave his palace and always be by his side. Sophia was very happy and confident that all their wishes would definitely come true. Roz was very confused when he burst into His Majesty's office. The man was sure that it was because of his actions that the harvest festival had ended early that year. The emperor was very angry because he had not allowed him to enter his office and shout. The magician believed that it was not very wise of His Majesty to interfere in the affairs of women who had offended his assistant. Now the magician was sure that the marquise was very upset by what had happened and that they could lose the trust of her entire family. But His Majesty was sure that it would not end so easily and ordered that Tyram's daughter be immediately expelled from the estate. He also ordered that 3 magicians from the imperial court be assigned to Sophia. Finally, he emphasized that he did not want anyone to forget that he was the emperor of the entire empire, which is why he wanted to sort everything out himself so as not to lose face in front of everyone. When he found out that everything had already been decided without him, he became very angry, because his word was the most important thing. Therefore, he ordered everyone to shut up and sit down, because the meeting was not over yet. His Majesty stood before everyone present and wanted to hear everyone if they had anything to say, but many of them simply tried to remain silent. Then the emperor emphasized that the Marquis of Tyram would be stripped of his title and reduced to a viscount. The man could not believe what he had heard because he decided that both the emperor and the woman had been humiliated, although the emperor himself did not think so. He emphasized that it was unacceptable to wear a ruby necklace and that this act could not be justified, as well as the fact that His Majesty had managed to spill wine on his wife. Charles completely disagreed with the bald man and did not even want to continue this senseless conversation, but he emphasized that the girl who was in his possession had still been humiliated, and he did not like that at all. He grabbed his sword and wanted the Marquis to thank him for not punishing them too harshly, as his head could have easily been cut off. The bald man could not calm down and began to say that he knew exactly how Charles had obtained his title and his position. The girl decided to ask the woman where they could go next, but they immediately agreed to go to the garden. But they had not gone far when they met another beautiful woman who wanted to talk to the girls standing in front of her. At first, she decided to find out right away what had happened, because she understood that a beauty like her would never come here just like that. Then the girl wanted to know if the beauty had noticed how the other girls treated her, but she was not ready for such a question. She also mentioned that the man who had recently had a very high status was now a completely different person with a different status. After this conversation, she decided to ask why the woman was telling her all this, because she understood that not everyone had this information. The woman said that she was convinced that everyone was in the same position, so she really wanted to help the girl. The beautiful woman who listened to all this emphasized that she was actually doing it for the joy of it, because she loved helping other people. Despite such kind words, the girl still did not intend to trust this person, because she knew that everything could change in an instant. As soon as the girls arrived at the meeting, they immediately began to look around and realized that they were alone. Then one of them decided to apologize to Lady Sophia because she understood that they had simply been jealous of her at first and did not want to admit it. But the workers standing next to her thought that there was no need to apologize to such people, because they could have done the same. The group of girls split into 2 camps, one wanting to vote for and support Sophia, and the other against it, which led to a small conflict. They were grateful for everything they had because they understood that this was actually a wonderful moment to discuss all the flaws of each of the characters. The girl calmly endured all the kind words spoken to her, but she was also cautious because she knew that everything could change at any moment. After a while, men in special costumes met who wanted to talk about important events, and one of them really wanted to meet one person. Unfortunately, when he received a negative response to his request, he realized that he just needed to pass the information on to this man. He agreed to fulfill his friend's request, but understood that he had to do it in such a way as not to compromise himself. The man often recalled all the events that had happened to him in the past, and the young man did not like it, but there was nothing he could do about it. As soon as the girl gathered her courage, she immediately decided to knock on the door to tell the man everything. A second later, the emperor heard someone knocking on his door again, and he realized that it was definitely the girl. She was surprised that the man had known long ago that the beauty was coming to him, so she reacted calmly to it all. As soon as he noticed that she was looking at him strangely, the girl immediately apologized and wanted to ask something. As it turned out, the girl was really curious why the man had sent one of the ladies to one place, because she understood that in the future, the same thing could happen to her. At first, he wanted to know why she needed such information, and then the beauty said that she was just worried about her future. At that moment, the emperor concluded that he was so repulsive to the girl that she simply did not want to know anything about him. The woman, of course, denied all this and emphasized that she wanted very much to live a long and happy life, and for this, she had to work hard. Then he smiled and emphasized that until the girl cured his illness, which was related to sleep, he would not let her go anywhere. After she did nothing at all, the emperor asked the girl to get to work as soon as possible because he did not want to waste a minute of rest. When she had finished all her work, she decided to ask him how he was feeling and whether he had regained his strength. In fact, the man had not rested at all, but for him it was better than nothing. So he thanked the girl anyway. He continued to calmly analyze all the data he had in his letters, but the young man often thought about the girls who had made such a strong impression on him. All that day, he had the image of the girl who had actually given him a second life before his eyes, so he was incredibly grateful to her. It was very difficult for him to admit this in real life, as he was not used to thanking anyone, let alone admitting that he was a weak person. Today, the young man realized that he needed to train very hard because it was one of those days when he had a lot of energy to use in the right way. The girl told her friends that she was a little busy today, so they decided to leave. The women often discussed the beauty behind her back because they understood that she was very attractive, even to them. This time, they decided to take the girl's side because they were convinced that the emperor often treated her badly. The heroine, in turn, calmly analyzed everything that was happening in her life, and she also incredibly liked the smell of flowers that grew almost everywhere. As soon as she turned her head, she saw a man with blue hair who, as it turned out, was responsible for her escort. When the man arrived in this area, he did not understand at first what the girl was doing near such a weak hero. The leader, in turn, continued to train actively, and after a while, he managed to make much better moves with his sword. After a while, his rival simply gave up and could no longer compete with such a strong opponent because he was not well enough trained. Eventually, the man with blue hair decided to approach the emperor himself and talk to him. As soon as the man saw him with his own eyes, he was immediately filled with a desire to simply kill this hero. But he understood that this could not be done under any circumstances. At first, he decided to ask why the young man had disturbed him on such a day, but he did not receive a clear answer. Then the young man began to behave much better and simply handed over the letter that Sophia had written to the emperor. And a second later, he decided to leave. The man was incredibly curious to read this letter, and as soon as night fell, the young man immediately began to analyze it. He also remembered the words the girl had said to him when they met, so he realized that he needed to prepare for their meeting. The girl was surprised when she noticed the hero she had not expected to see that day. After a while, the man also realized that the girl actually liked the flowers she always loved to take with her. After that, the workers, who were the most important people in the city, decided to settle a few issues. And then one of them realized that they had completely sorted everything out. One duke sitting next to the emperor concluded that he simply wanted to get closer to the girl he liked so much. He was not afraid to express these thoughts in front of everyone, and then some of them began to shout loudly at the man, but he did not care. In fact, everyone knew very well what the emperor was like inside, so no one wanted to contradict him. But this man was an exception that day. Lowering his head, the young man decided not to respond to such words because he understood that he could only make the situation worse. Turning his head to all the people he had been talking to, the man said that they would discuss it all tomorrow, but today he did not want to talk about it anymore. The young man, who was still sitting at his desk, thought about it all and did not know how to act in this situation. He was well aware that if he simply left the situation as it was, it would only get worse, because in the future, not only he but also the girl could be in danger. But before he could do so, a man who also wanted to discuss everything in order to clear up the situation came in. Meeting with his employees, he asked them to finish their work as quickly as possible, because there was very little time left. As soon as one of them wanted to leave, the emperor emphasized that he had not yet finished his work and had to stay there. Having received the long-awaited artifact, the man realized that this stone now contained a great power that could change many things. The emperor emphasized that he only needed 2 days to create a normal magic stone, but his acquaintance did not think that the man would be able to do it so quickly. The girl was happy because she had slept very well that day and had enough strength to continue living her life normally. She realized that she needed to get ready quickly to wake her husband up and go with him to discuss something. But she had not gone far when she saw an exquisite dress in front of her, which she liked very much. She took a long time to get ready and realized that she would be late, which she didn't like because she knew that her husband would definitely say something about it. The girl didn't know what was behind the door, but she was 100% sure that the conference had probably started long ago. As soon as she entered, she saw the emperor, who was very well dressed that day and was giving clear orders to his subordinates. When he began to notice that some people did not want to listen to him, the emperor emphasized that he was the same Charles who controlled all people. He was glad to see the girl in front of him, so he urged her to come closer and listen calmly to what he had to say. At first, she was very nervous because she realized that she was late and that everyone was paying attention to her because of that. Outwardly, the girl tried to behave very confidently, although inside her whole body was trembling from the man's gaze. The young man began to read the letter, which clearly stated that the emperor was making Sophia his person to help him cope with his insomnia. When it came down to it, the girl heard quite a few unfamiliar names that did not inspire any trust in her. As soon as she came closer to the man, she noticed that he wanted to give her something very valuable. As it turned out, it was very expensive jewelry, but unfortunately the girl's ears were not pierced, so she could not wear it. The emperor began to apologize because he had not thought about it at all and understood that he needed to behave very politely with the girl. A second later, he hugged her and asked her not to worry about it because it was important to him. The girl was incredibly pleased that everyone treated her so well, because now she held a high position. After a while, an acquaintance who was standing near the emperor decided to take the beauty to a certain place. As soon as they went inside, she did not immediately realize where she was, as she had never been in such rooms before. The man with blue hair immediately bowed to the girl and was incredibly happy to see her. When he heard the emperor's order, he immediately began to carry it out, and now he had to guard the girl at all times. Over time, the man noticed that the girl was very upset, so he urged her to think about the future, because in the future she would have a very good salary. She was only happy to hear these words, so she decided that she really needed to appreciate this moment in her life. The girl often remembered how the emperor treated her and understood that she was now under the protection of a high-ranking man who could always help her. It was also a little strange for her to hear the man say that he would never let her go until she cured him. Meanwhile, the beauty tried to behave very politely in a society where there were quite intelligent people who played an important role in this empire. As soon as she saw this man again, she asked him what he was doing there, but he was just doing his job. Suddenly, she wanted to read a newspaper that the man was holding, and then the beauty realized that something was really wrong here. After reading quite a few interesting facts, the man realized that this was a big surprise for the girl, because she did not expect to see such things. But before they could finish talking, the girl simply turned around and ran away from the area as fast as she could. The next morning, as soon as she woke up, she began to feel like a real person who now constantly did only what she had to do and lived according to a schedule. When he opened his eyes, the man was surprised that it was already morning, because all this time had flown by unnoticed for him. As soon as the girl entered his room, she immediately pointed out that perhaps she no longer needed to come and visit the young man every morning. He didn't like this attitude because he thought that the woman had become lazy and didn't want to do her job. He also noticed that the dress he had recently given her looked very nice on her, and the beauty began to feel a little shy. The girl said that she had actually worn the dress because it suited her very well, and it was not only the lady who had noticed this. After a while, when they had got into a nice conversation, the girl asked if she could ask the man a question. She really wanted to know if the man was going to leave the other girls in the house too, but he didn't quite understand the question. The girl simply didn't understand why he kept so many girls in his palace if they played no role in his life. As it turned out, the emperor simply wanted to spend more time with them because he liked it when they paid a lot of attention to him. The beauty was stunned to hear such words directed at her, but decided to remain silent and say nothing. However, the emperor had no intention of ending the conversation, so he continued to give several reasons why he acted the way he did. After a while, the young man asked her if she was really the person who wanted to spend some time with him. The girl emphasized that she had always been on her husband's side and did not understand why he was so picky about her at times. He had no intention of being angry with her because he understood that she played the most important role in his life. At times, she began to notice that her husband was looking at her very strangely, and this made the beautiful woman like him even more. The man simply understood that if the girl disappeared from his life, it could have a very negative impact on his future development. She, in turn, decided to take a little break because such hard work took a lot of energy from the beauty. As soon as the emperor woke up abruptly, memories from his childhood flooded back, which often had a negative impact on his life. When he noticed that the girl was just sleeping next to him, he was quite surprised but decided to continue watching her. At the same time, the emperor wanted to fall asleep quickly, but he understood that it was impossible at that moment. When he woke up, he stared at her constantly and did not know what to do, because he wanted to move her a little, but did not dare. Finally, the emperor touched Sophia and wanted to move her to the sofa, but he was very afraid that she might wake up. But he didn't really want to leave her next to him on the bed either. Suddenly, he noticed that she was holding on to his clothes and decided that he was pressing her body a little, as all the buttons were fastened. It seemed to him that these clothes were definitely uncomfortable, and he wanted to free her from them a little. In her sleep, Sophia began to hug him, and then His Majesty even began to regret not moving her to the sofa, but it was already a little too late. In the morning, when she woke up, she realized that she was in a completely different place and not even in her own bed. She had fallen asleep again on His Majesty's bed. The girl immediately began to apologize as she had not noticed how suddenly she had fallen asleep. He was a little upset, as he had to sleep in a bed that was not his own, and even thought he might have fallen off the uncomfortable sofa. She tried with all her might to make up for her mistake and promised that it would never happen again. His Majesty wanted her to repay him for what had happened and ordered her to go to the kitchen and bring him breakfast. The emperor wanted her to have breakfast too, and to do so first, lest she faint from exhaustion. When he looked at her, he thought she had lost a lot of weight and was on the verge of collapse, so he wanted her to eat more. The girl did not argue with him much, so she began to eat, but for some reason she did it very quickly, so that it even seemed that she was worried that someone would take it away from her. His Majesty could not resist and began to laugh. It was probably the first time the girl had seen a smile on his face. The next day, His Majesty and the magician had a rather important conversation. Roz announced that they had only the northern lands, the capital, and the territory around it left. Carl understood that everything was actually unsafe and warned Roz about it, but the magician understood that he had put his life on the line just like the emperor. Then the man even dared to ask the emperor for a day off as he was very worried about him. The emperor understood that the time had come. The day of the Marquis's daughter's death had arrived. When the magician looked at the emperor's shoes, he noticed a butterfly. It was an image of a spell, which was considered powerful magic. Only someone with extraordinary power could have done this. Meanwhile, Sophia gathered a bouquet of flowers and decided that His Majesty would definitely like them. But in the morning, the emperor was in a bad mood for some reason and did not smell any of the scents of the siren. She looked at the emperor with great pleasure and realized that she'd been with him for 3 months and had gotten to know him very well during that time. Suddenly, Sophia met the mistress in the corridor but accidentally mistook her for the magician. Their conversation was quickly interrupted by a guard who hurriedly tried to inform them that a guest had arrived for Sophia and was already waiting for her. It was the very man who had sent his daughter to the emperor to certain death. The girl had read about it in her novel, so she knew everything in advance. In fact, they hadn't seen each other for a very long time, so the man admitted that he was glad to see her. He noticed that the girl was shaking and wanted to know how she had been treated back then. He really wanted to talk to her and suggested they go to her room. The woman also decided to join their conversation and first introduced herself as Meryl de Roz, a respected white mage. He kissed her hand and apologized for not recognizing her at first glance. It was a great honor for both of them to greet each other, but since there was not much time, the man wanted to end the conversation with Sophia. But Meryl understood that the conversation with the man might not be pleasant, so she tried to take the girl with her, which Mr. Blanc did not like very much. In fact, there was no conversation. The woman simply wanted Sophia to accompany her to the emperor's office, where her husband was. She tried to explain that she couldn't leave her with that man when she saw how badly she was shaking and couldn't even calm down. Meryl didn't know the real reason, but she understood that there were times when it was better to run away than to fight. Roz was very confused when he saw the two women who were very dear to him. The woman suggested that they all go home together, but the man didn't even know what to do because everyone understood what kind of day awaited them. She was very surprised and didn't know what to do because she hadn't put fresh flowers in His Majesty's room. For a moment, she realized that even if she managed to escape, it would be impossible to get out of the mansion. And then she was even more surprised when she saw that there was definitely no way out of the mansion. Now it was clear why there were so few people there, not counting the guests at the festivities. Looking around, she saw that everything reminded her of medieval Europe. The woman admitted that her husband rarely came home and always emphasized that he was very busy. Sophia thought that now she could visit this woman more often, but she didn't know if the emperor would let her go. When she saw where they had arrived, she was simply amazed. Everything around her was incredible. The women immediately decided to have some tea, and everything around them was pink, like the clothes and hair of their hosts. The girl greeted them and said that she was Sophia Blank, the healer of His Majesty's insomnia. Now the woman understood that this was the girl everyone was talking about. Meryl allowed her to call her Sophia, as that was what she liked best, and she very much wanted to have a granddaughter like her. She confessed that she and her husband had lost their son in an accident, after which they were left alone, and now she had a granddaughter. Roz was actually not very happy that his wife had met Sophia and gotten to know her. He didn't know what to do next, because if everything turned out the way he thought, he didn't know if he could take the girl in. In fact, he knew very well that he and his wife didn't have much time left and needed to prepare. For Marcus, Sophia was a daughter, and for Meryl, she was a son. But the anniversary of his death was the next day. Beautiful flowers bloomed around them, even though it was winter. Meryl confessed that it was her husband who had created the protective natural magic. She added that he had cast the spell when His Majesty was still very young, even before his mother died. His Majesty Emperor Karl had loved flowers since childhood, and always enjoyed playing in the garden where they grew in abundance. His mother had asked a magician to grant her son's wish and cast a spell so that the flowers would never wilt. But after Karl's mother died, he never visited the garden again. He believed that his mother had died because of him. The woman remembered that he was very young at the time and could not express any emotions, never even crying, as if he knew the reason for his mother's death. From everything she heard, Sophia realized that the emperor's mother had died under very strange circumstances. After that, the previous emperor, the empress, and the prince all began to fall ill and die one after another. He understood well that there was some reason for this, but gathering his strength, he somehow managed to accept the situation. Meryl believed that His Majesty must have felt a little better if he allowed Sophia to be with him all the time. Now she understood that if the woman was telling the truth, then all might not be lost yet. Before returning to the palace, she and Meryl chose a dress for Sophia that perfectly matched the color of her eyes. Then the woman decided to take a closer look at the buttons, which were made of stones. While everyone was busy choosing an outfit for her, she decided to look at the masks hanging on the wall. Maybe she would even choose one for herself. When the girl suddenly turned around, she saw a young man who looked like Karl, an incredibly handsome man. He wanted to ask her for one thing.